to Long Time No See. I'm CJ Allen. Tonight, I'll be interviewing Richard Hatch, the winner of the first season of Survivor. Survivor debuted on CBS back in 1999. 16 people were deserted on a remote island off the coast of Borneo, competing for $1 million. Richard Hatch, the winner of that season, has had quite the journey over the past 20 years since that first season aired. Our interview is going to start with a conversation about Richard Hatch growing up as a young man, and we'll also dive into some of the behind the scenes about Survivor, about The Apprentice, about President Donald Trump, and his philosophy on life. Enjoy this first episode. Thank you for watching. Talk to me about Rich Hatch growing up. Okay. And what was that Richard Hatch like?
It's funny at this age to think back to who I was and how this guy that I am came to be. I lived in a really blue-collar kind of family. My dad was a lobsterman, a cop, and he also worked as a technician at a laboratory that made things that measured the sun. God knows what he did, kind of calibrating machines and things like that. He was an interesting character. Both of my parents were very, on one hand, kind of puritanical, I almost want to say. Their parents were religious. My mother changed from Protestant to Catholic when she was young, but after they divorced, my father then changed to Methodist. My grandparents remained Protestant the whole time and always kind of were going to church. It always fascinated me because it made no sense. It just didn't. And we lived in front of my grandparents. So my grandparents had a piece of property. Their house was in the back of it and ours was in the front. We rented from them. And when my parents divorced, they continued to rent. I think it was $40 a month to my mom, and we stayed there just to help cover some of the costs. But it was a bad relationship, my mom and my dad's. The entire time it was detached and uncomfortable, and there was never any kind of example of healthy, loving interaction. I don't remember in our entire lives, the 4 kids and us, ever being told I love you. And when my father would drive in the driveway, you'd hear my mom say, "Oh, here comes that asshole to have his mother wipe his ass." And they divorced when I was 11. And I was the oldest of the 4. So that, this went on forever, basically. But I was pretty observant and pretty aware, as I recall, all my life. And then when my brother died at 13, he was 13, I was 15, he was run over by a car. I remember becoming even that much more kind of introspective and challenging of what's true and the norms, those kinds of things. And we can go right to it. I guess I started before that because I was raped when I was 8. And that was impactful, I guess is the word I'd use. I don't remember the details of what happened after, but I remember vividly what happened during. In the shed, there were 3 people, 2 guys and a girl. One guy and a girl held my hands down, and the other guy, who in the neighborhood was perceived by the adults as a weirdo, was stuffed chestnuts up my butt. So, maybe he was a weirdo. I was 8.
Yeah, maybe. Might have been a weirdo.
Maybe. But I left the shed, and I don't remember what I did. I don't remember where I went or whether I went home or whatever. Nothing kind of after that, which is odd. Like, certainly didn't tell my parents or anybody, and I don't know why, other than my parents weren't people you would tell things like that. They weren't people we felt we could go to with anything honest, really. There was no relationship built between us. And it's unfortunate, but I have compassion for both of them because I don't think either of them love themselves or know what it's like to be loved, which is kind of a sad thing. And both of them are still alive. Then I was molested again when I was 10, and it was like amazing, such a powerful, positive, incredible experience. And I know that sounds really, really odd, but I was 10 years old, and this guy was 14 or 15, and he brought me into a lifeguard's locker room, and he sat down and had me stand next to him and was sucking my dick and asked me, he was saying, oh, it's a little salty. He says, you want to taste mine? And I was like, no. I didn't even know anything about sex or anything about what any of it was. But he kept doing something, rubbing his penis. And I go, what are we doing? What are we doing? He says, hold on a minute. And he was very hairy and big, and I was fascinated. And then he came, and I did not know what, wow, what's that? And is that going to happen to me? And I couldn't believe it. And so I started jerking off for the next 2 years before I could even ejaculate. Kind of crazy experience. But what I learned growing up is, and nobody talks about these things and many other things happened to me in the neighborhood with neighbor boys, walking into clubs we started, but you had to have your pants off, and jerking off with another guy who was, parents were in the Navy, and different stuff like that as we were growing up. I learned happens to many, if not most, boys growing up, and the conversations that don't happen about it, and the kind of reserved, awful, oh my God, as if it is something horrendous, is what does more damage, I believe, than events like that second one. Where the first one, a rape, is certainly horrendous and should be dealt with psychologically, etc., with care and concern. The second one, and things like that, where boys are playing and learning, I feel we cause more problems when we make them horrendous. That's just a thought or observation of mine over the years in challenging guys, straight guys, friends of mine, gay guys, whomever, to talk about their youth. Many of them have never talked with anyone before, other than from my kind of probing to find out what their youth was like. Gosh, I'm like, where to go from here? Because these sexual incidents mark my life profoundly, and I remember them so vividly, and it's a big part of who I am because being gay was thought of as so awful. And I don't even like saying was thought of, because the truth is bigotry, homophobia, racism are as rampant as ever. Are we hanging people with nooses? Maybe not as often as happened, as horrible as that sounds. But the damage and the devastation and the destruction of families as a result of those things, bigotry, homophobia, racism, continues vehemently and is often swept under the rug.
And that takes me to a point in just riffing off of what you said. When you came out to your family and friends, however it happened, what was that like for you, and what was that experience?
That's a great question. I don't know if I was ever in.
Well, that was something else that I was thinking as you were talking about your childhood and how those events impacted you. I would imagine that it likely had an enormous impact on your sexuality.
I think it did, and for me, I don't have any idea, nor do I wrestle with whether I was genetically inclined toward being gay or environmentally, these things caused some proclivity. Couldn't care less. Maybe it's a mixture. All I know is when one is gay, and I know there's a spectrum, but you know, he's gay. It's not, this is great. So I said to my dad, because he, of all people, just couldn't get it. And I was older then, 20 something. Like I said, I was never really in, but nobody knew. I was in an interesting position different from many, many, many gay guys that I know and that I've talked to and that I grew up with, one of whom committed suicide. Nobody seemed to know that I was gay, but I wasn't hiding it either. I wasn't going around telling everybody all the time that's what it is. But even at West Point, I was having sex with guys when I was in the Army, and just because you couldn't talk about it, not talking about it. But somehow I made those connections. I'm not even sure how, and things happened, and it was a relatively comfortable experience, other than to the point when I decided, oh, I can't make a career of something where I have to pretend or hide who I am, and so I left the Army. But your question was coming out, and how did I with my dad, that's where I was going. I said, you know, Dad, I know you don't get it. I know you don't seem to understand this, and you think it's, you know, a phase or something like that. But when you were 10, 11, 12 or so, did you decide you'd rather not play with wieners and you'd love to play with boobies? When did you make that decision?
Right.
What the hell are you talking about? I said, exactly. Me either. I just like the wiener, Dad. Boobies don't do a thing for me. I mean, nothing. They just simply don't. There's no reaction.
Right.
And I think he got it from that. It took him a little while, but he got it from that. For me, that life has been shaped for me with respect to the pursuit of what's true and what is reality. And so when people aren't really curious enough about that, even this sounds political, and I'm not political. I tend not to be, but Trump is such a moron and so incompetent and incapable a human being, and I know him personally. The idea that someone could be so supportive and lack such curiosity about who he really is terribly off-putting for me, and that's my mom.
And we're gonna get to the president a little bit later on in more depth. I want to fast forward a bit to what, 1999, 1998, and you're 38, 39 years old when the Survivor casting call comes out.
38.
Yeah, and it's this show that's going to put 16 people on an island for $1 million. And what was your initial impression about this new show and what it was going to be, and how much did you know about it? And at the onset, did you know that there was going to be this elimination, voting people out component to the show?
I think that was part of the very, very sparse information they shared with us. I had lived a fascinating life. If I didn't like what I was doing, I left that and went to do something else. I'd been in the Army, and I started a company doing corporate training, myself doing training all over the country, and I really felt like I understood who people are. And my academic background was in psychology. So I had a bachelor's degree in applied behavioral sciences and management. And people, as I'd said earlier, talking about my childhood, always have fascinated me. I was always introspective. I was always interested in who we really are, and I wanted to get at the heart of it, and I could observe people for hours, just intrigued. So what happened was my mom, I think first, said, hey, they're putting together a show just for you. She had no idea who, they, what, nothing. And I'm like, yeah, Ma. She always had ideas. She always had, this is what you should be doing. And about a week after that, a friend from DC contacted me and said almost the exact same thing. But she said, CBS is putting together a show just for you. I thought, well, what the hell? They don't know one another, and that's odd. And so I looked it up, and it was a show made for me. It was about who we are. It wasn't really about survival. It was a social experiment. Yet, camping, I'd spent a month in the Talkeetna Mountains, north of Anchorage in Alaska. I'd spent a month in Maine, and I loved camping and traveling. I'm a scuba instructor, and so I was firing on all cylinders from the outset. And I found out that the application had to be sent in, and it was like 18 pages long, and it had questions like, who would you not want to be on the island with?
Right.
And I put like morons and bigots and bores. Oh my! So with every question, I tried to be interesting enough because I imagined they would be reading thousands of them. And it turns out they were, and the rest is history. I went through that whole process with them, and it became what it is. And it was a very, very interesting, challenging, and impactful time in my life, because I went into that never having faced any, ostensibly, any prejudice or obvious bigotry prior to that. But once you are who I am on national TV, unapologetically atheist, gay, etc., just comfortable with that and interested in talking with folks about who they are and what their thoughts are about people and how we differ from one another. America was far from ready. I was going to say not ready, far from ready for that. And so I began to then encounter incredible, destructive bigotry and homophobia, which became the underlying basis of all the legal battles and everything else that I ended up facing.
What were you thinking when you get cast for this show? Something that had never been done before, and there really must have been a thought on the production side of, well, what is this going to be? How is it going to turn out?
Well, go ahead. The production side was shocked. The only reason, well, I won't say the only reason, but the main reason I was selected was because they were certain. They had certainty I would be the first person voted off. They selected me because of what they perceived as arrogance and outspokenness, and they talked about that. Jeff Probst, the host, had no idea what to do with me. He didn't have any idea that I would be capable of or be doing the things that I was doing to move through the game successfully. And Mark Burnett specifically wrote in his book, In Real Time, we selected him because I knew he would be first voted off.
Yeah.
I went into the final interview, which there were several throughout the country, and then there was a time during which we were sequestered in Southern California for the final medical and all this other stuff. But the last interview there was with the executives, the suits at CBS. And there might have been 15 or 16 people in a room in a little semicircle. And I walked into the room and I put my hand on the little chair they had that I was supposed to sit in front of them. I just put my hand on the back of it and said, look, you know you're going to pick me. What you don't know is I'm going to win. And what you know for planning purposes, I'm going to host next year's show. So could we move this on a little bit? And I walked out of the room to them.
And that was a story that I've heard you talk about before.
Oh, okay.
about but still, I was actually going to bring that up next and ask you about going into the room and saying, I'm going to win and I'm going to host next season. And who is in the room is, well, for you and I is really irrelevant. Those people don't matter, right? But you tell them straight up, just basically sign the check and give it to you right then and there. Yeah. Was that part of strategy? Was that ego talking? Were you just messing with their heads, or was it just, I want to stand out and I want to get on the show, so I'm going to say this to them?
Yes.
All the above.
So, CJ, it's who I am. When I go into a challenge, I try to think it through as thoroughly and clearly ahead of time as I can. And so I knew that there was this game I would have to be capable of playing, and that it was a social experiment. And I thought, who better could be prepared for that? I love figuring out who people are. I feel like I'm superbly adept at it. I understand the interaction that we have that's most powerful, the nonverbal communication that most communication confidence can come from when you're communicating with people. So that kind of thing made me confident. And I then knew that I had to have this other exchange with producers, because I had to be selected in order to be successful in the game. So there were two separate things. And I knew what producers were looking for. This is a show. So they wanted to know who you really were. And if I couldn't convince them that I was this cocky, arrogant, open person, I mean, one of their delineating exercises was to put you in a room with a camera running and didn't give you any instructions. So I took off my clothes and just talked to them and showed them the different parts of my body that I thought, hey, this is a little uncomfortable and I'd love to get rid of some of that there and whatever. I didn't care, and I wanted them to know that.
So it was a combination of strategy and messing with their heads.
Correct.
Yeah.
Full on all of those things. Full on, it was strategy. Full on, it was who I was, if that's who I needed to be. It was my full on effort.
You were winning before you even got in front of the camera, or even got on that boat.
Yeah.
Or left for boarding.
People ask if I believed it, and I did. I believed I had as best as anyone else, and I felt more the opportunity to win, the skills and the ability to do what it took to win the show. So who else is going to tell them that?
True.
I don't have somebody telling them that for me. So I told them that's what I believed, and it was what I believed. You can't argue that I was overconfident or arrogant. Well, maybe you could argue I was arrogant.
Would you like me to go down the list?
Yeah. But overconfidence doesn't fit if you actually succeed, if what you were saying was accurate. So people they don't have to. I think people should look at their own perceptions more frequently, more introspectively, try and figure out what it is that causes them to believe what they believe about others, because far too often it's projection. It's the things about themselves with which they're uncomfortable that they're projecting onto others as their main qualities, etc. And so I've faced that now for 20 years, which has been also interesting, but challenging. When you've thrown it out there to the entire world and you don't really have support from anyone but yourself, it's a little different than growing up in my town and being who I was and comfortable with that.
For sure. I get it. And you get out there and you've been in sequester from these 15 other people.
Yeah.
And I'm presuming you've been in sequester until you actually get out there and you're at the dock or wherever they picked you up with the boat to take that group picture where you're all smiling and happy and looking clean, which I'm sure you were like, let's just get this over with and move on.
Oh, dying.
Yeah. The first time that you speak to one another is kind of sort of when you jump off that boat and you've got everything in the water and you're collecting things and you're just screaming at each other. It's not really talking. It's more cameras are on. We got to go. So presumably it's when you get to the beach that you actually start having a real conversation. Who do you talk to first?
Yeah, so we were able to talk moments before, maybe 60 seconds before Jeff threw us off the boat. So we were held separately on the boat, and we were told not to speak to one another. But the game had started long before that for me. We were in a 5-star resort for 3 or 4 days to acclimate before that. And so I was watching anybody I could see whom I thought was interacting with producers. But on the boat, I recall specifically watching Rudy and recognizing the military attitude, the way in which he stood, the way in which he looked around, those kinds of things, and decided then, without even knowing that he was going to be on my team, I didn't know there were going to be teams, that I was going to be in an alliance with that one. Luckily, he was on my team, and we made an alliance, but that came much later because he didn't even think that that was ethical and didn't want to be part of an alliance, and so I made him part of it without his even willingness at first. But the first exchanges on the beach, I don't really recall. I remember many people needed to get on the raft, some of whom didn't swim very well, like Jervis, and I never got on the raft. I could swim the 1.5 miles or whatever it was to shore. And so I recall getting whatever we could, because we were allowed to get things from the boat, whatever we could grab, we could take, and just diving in and being terribly excited. I mean, just so excited. Finally, I'm in the water. That's my element. I'm cool now because it was hot. We had been walking and being filmed going through a Malaysian village. That was psychologically challenging because this wasn't a show. These were people living their lives on rickety piers that they built out into the water that were, from my perspective, challenging didn't even begin to cut it. I mean, just like, wow, this is the way they live. And so I was all wrapped up in that until we were put on the boat. But now all of that was released, and I was focused on, game on. None of this filming and questions and pretense. We're off to the races. And when we landed on the beach, I thought everything I had planned would unfold smoothly. Oh my God. These people were running around like chickens with their heads cut off, excited and wound up and doing absolutely nothing that I thought made sense. And so plans out the window.
Well, I would imagine, again, putting myself in that place, we've talked about our similarities and whatnot. For me, that would just be sensory overload.
I sat in a tree wondering, what am I going to do with these lunatics? Literally. I mean, I thought, look at them. They are crazy. They're running back and forth, and one's doing this and digging a hole here, and then they change their mind. I'm going to dig a hole here. And I'm thinking, they're not even playing the game. They've forgotten they're in a game. They were hugging and, they were friends already. Friends! These idiots have to go in order for me to win the money.
Sharing an experience and kumbaya.
Yeah. Oh, it was fascinating.
Well, I mean, that's interesting to me that you don't necessarily, or you can't necessarily pinpoint, like, who is that first person that came over and hugged you and was like, hey, how's it going? And because you were...
Well, there was lots of talk for those hours swimming in, whatever. It was 2 miles or 1.5 miles. It was a long distance from the boat to shore. And there were all kinds of
get to know
exhausted, words and comments, and off we go, and those kinds of things. But there was some separation between that voyage, swimming in and hitting the beach, because I thought once we hit the beach, that kind of sense of, okay, we've landed, now the game begins, let's focus on how we can do it. There are 2 teams, we are a team. so let's become one. And oh my gosh, none of what was logical to me, none of what seemed even the remotest, remoteliest reasonable was unfolding. And then there's a famous, a pretty clear, memorable scene in the footage that aired where I was in the tree and Sue said, I don't know about you corporate trainer people, but I'm a redneck and we just get stuff done. I was like, what stuff? What stuff? What do you want to do? Let's talk about what our goal. What are we doing here?
Right, you're looking for a plan. You're looking for the action plan of what's going to get done first, and at least some semblance of not the game strategy, but at least a strategy of what are we doing right now? What is the first thing as a collective that we can get done?
How can we protect ourselves? Should we worry about water first, or a shelter, or talk about how we're going to proceed against the other team? I mean, what do you mean get stuff done? I really couldn't grasp it. And then I realized something Rudy said after that was, it's not it's not them who had to change. I had to adapt my plans, and that's really when I knew what Survivor was.
You are really the creator of the almighty alliance for really the entire reality television genre. It's used in multiple shows. People use the word alliance, and now even the audience, the viewer, knows what that means. And really, you could have chosen any word to describe a group of people who have a similar goal in mind. What's the psychology behind the word alliance? Was that you, or was that a production note, or
oh god,
where does that word come from? Because it does, in talking about you in terms of a pop culture icon, in reality TV, that is a word that has become part of the lexicon.
Yeah, so it was not a production note by any stretch. In fact, I think production, to some extent, wondered how the game would unfold. Even though there was a game that none of us had seen, this had played out. It was called Family Robinson or Island Robinson. It was a Swedish show, and it was Survivor's predecessor. So there were people like Mark Burnett who you would think must have known how some of the dynamics played out. And by no means do I think that were it not for me, nobody would have ever made alliances. But what happened, I think, that is unique to me is that I was actually before the game even began, engaged in the development of those alliances that I knew would be necessary to move through a game like that. So I had already thought it through and planned it, and no one else had done that. And the impact of having done that in the original season without having had a precedent, without having ever seen anything about Survivor or the game or the way people might engage, I will not just take credit for, but I feel proud of having the foresight and the understanding of who we are and the ability to contextualize the rules of the game and to move forward. I don't know if you've heard me say this before. I actually, while filming, felt an enormous sense of pride. I just started to the point of tears at one point in the game. I was so proud of who I was, and I felt, because I wasn't someone who grew up in sports and in teams, the little gay boy that I was. There are lots of gay guys who are in teams now, but it just wasn't my thing. So I hadn't experienced that. I believed with all my heart that I was going to come home to the United States when the show aired, and I got to watch it with others, that I would be received like the MVP in a football game, that people would be enamored with the skills that I exhibited and how well I played without ever having had example. Wow! Oh, was that a letdown?
No, I don't remember it being that way.
No, I mean, Rosie O'Donnell hated me so much that when she had us on, she gave everybody a car and me a box of rice. I mean, she was an avid viewer. She just didn't get it. And for years, viewers didn't get the concept or the rules of the game, and that this skill that you needed to play well wasn't a way in which you necessarily lived your life. This was something you did, like when you would put on a football uniform and follow those rules. You don't tackle people in the supermarket either, but you're capable of doing it if you all agree to be engaged in that kind of a game. So even now, I think more and more viewers do understand that, but not all of them. And there's still a discomfort, I think, with someone as capable as I was so long ago, so early, before anyone had seen it done that way. And I think that causes people to be a little bit fearful of who I might be, or a little bit concerned about who I am, and certainly impacted my trial and my court case and who the judges thought of me as, and things like that. You can't extract the two. And sadly, that was devastating to my and my family's life.
The true purpose of the alliance, or at least how you planned it out. And I almost, in my mind, I have this picture of you kind of like being the architect in the Matrix, setting up how this is going to look. And you give or gave a very specific blueprint for how to create a solid alliance. And I think that in the first 3 or 4 seasons, that was successfully followed, not executed the best way, but followed. After that, it seems like people just haven't been able to hold one together. And why do you think that is?
There are many reasons for that, but the main one, the most clear from my perspective reasoning for why alliances are challenged and fail and stagger along oftentimes, is because people don't understand, even after having watched season 1, what they're made of. And so it's an odd game in which I would tell you, you must trust somebody. But the truth is, you not only have to be able to trust someone, you have to recognize the extent to which you can, or for how long you might be able to, and be willing to adapt as necessary when that trust is no longer available. But without being able to trust for some period, you can't hold an alliance together. And so, for example, I knew that the trust between Rudy and I would be unbreakable. I know what my word is. I know what honesty meant to me. I knew what his understanding, or lack thereof, of the game was about, so that my breaking of trust with him would have been devastating, would have undermined his whole perception of who I was as a person. And that was important, sufficiently important to me for that trust to be real.
Is there an element of luck in there, though, that you had Rudy in your season?
Well, perhaps. I'd say no, because I would do what I needed to do with someone else. So I had 2 others with whom I had to develop a certain amount of trust. And if there was luck involved, I'd say it happened here when I had alliances, strong alliances, strong within the context of the game, with Kelly and Sue. But when I realized that Kelly and Sue were plotting against me, that freed me up to use that trust only expediently, only so long as it fed whatever I needed. And I loved that. I loved that I could then stir the pot between the two of them and create tension and angst and all the stuff that was necessary to break down their bond so that I could move further. I didn't know it was going to psychologically affect Sue in the way that it did, and you know, professionals should have observed. So, but it did, and that was part of the cost of playing the game the way the rules, you know, enabled you to play it. So it wasn't just pure luck that Rudy was there, but I would say it was lucky that I had him to rely on, that I recognized who he was. There were others that could have been engaged that way, I would say. So Bibi from the other tribe was similar and as crotchety as Rudy. What people didn't see was, oh my God, the man was crotchety. You know, they only showed a certain amount of his stubbornness or roughness, but woo, he was a humdinger. I loved it because it was all part of, I can trust what's coming out of his mouth. There's no filter. But there were others that I could have built those kinds of relationships with if I chose to.
Do you think that people that people are scared when they get out there? Do you think that anxiety takes over for them and right away they just feel this need to scramble and secure themselves, and with the I like you and you like me and I've got your back and you've got mine, and literally the 10-minute pacts that exist in order just for them to feel safe? And what do you think about the evolution of the alliance where people hit the beach and they've already mapped out their final four within?
So I just got goosebumps. You're touching on something that I feel deeply about, strongly about, that I love about the game, and it's the what do I call it? The inevitability of exposure. So you land there in the midst of this game, and unlike our world, in which we wander around, superficially engaging, kind of, at a distance, with an abhorrent amount of pretense, I think. That's my perspective on who we are as humans. Not knowing anything about our neighbors, about the people with whom we work, because we're enabled to pretend. We're enabled to keep that distance. We don't have anything in our daily lives stripping us, literally and figuratively. And Survivor eliminates all of that. So different from what you just kind of proposed, it isn't that people get out there and have anxiety. I think they get out there and they face themselves, often for the first time. And maybe then they have anxiety, maybe that's a part of it, but the real dynamic that's unfolding is realness, is exposure, is this, holy crap, there's nothing behind which I can pretend, or, and that's all I have. There's no, I can't, pivot to conversation about this week's football game, or talk about the way in which my mother is dealing with a funeral, or it's all gone. And I love it. I love it. It's about who we are, and I'm comfortable with that exposure. Again, literally and figuratively, from having been so uncomfortable as a child. There wasn't realness. I didn't want to get naked in the group showers at school. I was fat and I didn't like my body. And so there was this horrible kind of life or angst in life that led me to get, that's stupid. Everybody's got a body, everybody's got different parts of it that they're uncomfortable with. And so then the nudity became just a non-issue. And then that evolved, well, I don't know the exact order, into loving, exposing who I am and learning who people really are. And that became what's valuable in life to me. And it still is to this day. I'm bored beyond description with superficiality and the weather and the parties where we pretend this or that and we ask about a recipe, and my close friend would call it
Which is how I
talk.
started last week, right? When I said, let's just get past the crap about the weather. We're just going to jump right into this and not even bother with that stuff. Though we did it today, which was kind of funny. I noticed that.
Yeah. It's ironic. There is a comfort and an ability to do that after you've broken through a little bit that I accept, and that makes sense to me.
But is it what I'm getting at? Is it premature for these people to get out there and immediately, well, let's go to the water hole and get water and talk about how we're going to do this? Like literally from a viewer's point of view, hours of being on the beach, or to put it into a different context, to immediately go scramble looking for the hidden immunity idol, but primarily, again, the social dynamic of it, the abruptness that people just, I need to get into this plan right now without doing what I presume you would advise, and just stepping back and really looking at this first.
I don't advise stepping back. I do advise doing that prior to entering the game, but once you've entered the game, stepping back is dangerous. Stepping back distances you in a way that causes you to be targeted. So, but when I step forward, it's in honesty. And that's the part that's the dichotomy that people can't get. What do you mean, honesty in Survivor? So here's the key. I don't fear being honest about who I am, because I feel like that will benefit me across the board. I don't feel as if that is something people will use against me, or will undermine my gameplay. In fact, the opposite. When you are dishonest and holding back and withholding pieces here and pieces there and deciding when and what you want to share in ways that are perceived by anybody else, you're a target. You're dangerous. You are someone to fear and someone with whom opening up is not an option. So my approach is to jump in. It isn't what you're talking about. It isn't to plan something. It's all part of that information gathering phase, but it has to happen relatively quickly, and I'd say immediately, so that the people with whom you're playing have the opportunity to share who they are with you, which is valuable information, and you aren't targeted. It's a much more difficult thing to do than it is for me to explain. And I don't think, if I'm honest, most people can do it. So why 40 seasons in, even in Winners at War, you see people like Ben who simply couldn't do it. He just wasn't capable. He couldn't engage the game the way is necessary to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Questions from viewers and or fans. There are a couple of them. This is from @Dan0202020202, because 01010101 must have been taken, on Instagram. You've been pretty vocal about people like Russell Hantz, mm-hmm. and the fact that he doesn't know how to play Survivor. Do you think he and others don't really know how to play, or that is just different from when the first time you played?
No, I don't think it's different. I think the game is more similar to what the original game was than viewers or participants seem to realize. The game hasn't changed. The goal, the rules, the game itself, and the skills it takes to be successful aren't different from the skills that were necessary originally. The idea of Russell Hantz feeling like he's the greatest player is the best example I can think of delusion, because it's so clear. He has this energetic and compelling to watch way in which he maneuvers and finds idols, and this energy that causes viewers to connect with him in certain ways. Even the ways in which he talks with other players has people's jaw dropping and looks, and did he just say that really? And so it's fun. And okay, Russell is a compelling character, but none of that is connected to what's required to win. And so that's where he fails in understanding Survivor. Survivor isn't about finding idols or winning a challenge. Survivor is about causing, in whatever way you're capable of causing it to happen, jurors to vote for you. And those skills are different from the ones that are sometimes compelling. Now, I'd make an argument for my ability to do those things that I just said in a compelling way, because I engage the audience in our off time with the camera, in our interviews, etc., sharing with them what I'm about to do and why I'm doing it and what impact I expect it will have on this person or that. And that's not done by many players. And I feel like I'm good at that, and I feel like that's compelling television. So you can be a compelling character while still having the capacity to play the game well. Russell simply just doesn't play Survivor well. He just doesn't. And there are many people who don't. They lose sight. Was it Ozzy who won, 5 challenges in a row or something like that? And, is so proud of the number of challenges he keeps winning. Missing the boat. Oop, wait, it sailed away. That's not the game of Survivor. Can winning challenges help you? Yeah. So I would make an argument that if you can win 5 challenges in a row and not win the game, you're a worse player than someone who won no challenges and got further.
Fair. I think that's fair. Emil on Facebook asked, do you think you'd even bother with a hidden immunity idol?
I would, because there are benefits to having them. And as the game evolves and the strategies associated with having a hidden immunity idol can be added to the strategies that you're using with respect to interpersonal dynamics and alliances, etc., there's no reason not to. So certainly I wouldn't avoid, finding hidden immunity idols. They're, I'm going to say, relatively easy to find. It isn't as if they are miles from camp. So in all the seasons that they've had hidden immunity idols, they're within a certain, because you're only allowed to go within a certain environment.
Radius from the camp, yeah.
And given that, why wouldn't you, exploit them?
Yeah.
I'd exploit anything. That's part of the game.
Would you really do that frantic thing of scurrying around or would it be more of, if I come across it, I come across it?
I love this question for this reason, because it's a great example of how there are questions that don't make sense or that literally can't be answered because everything is contextual.
Yeah.
So for example, if it makes sense for me to scurry around like a lunatic so that I fit in looking like the idiots scurrying around to look like an idiot, I'd scurry around and look like an idiot, just to be perceived that way. But I wouldn't do that at the expense of something more important or more effective in the game. So my goal, I wouldn't go crazy and just running without context, without having the opportunity to, without being seen. Then I might, or it having an impact on others that I want to have for certain reasons. Everything in the game is contextual. Everything has to be decided based on what's happening then. And that's the adaptability, the flexibility that most people are overwhelmed by, if they're even capable of maintaining it. It's still exhausting and overwhelming. And it's unique to the game of Survivor, but it's necessary to be successful.
And from Instagram again, I Drink Moonshine 1967 asked if animosity could be put aside by you or CBS, and I would imagine that Probst is in here too, would you actually go out there again, and do you think you'll ever be asked?
I don't think I'll ever be asked. But if I were to be asked, it would be because the remnants of Les Moonves and all of the executives and management under him had been replaced or matured in such a way that they recognized the abuses that they've levied upon participants. So for me to be asked again would require Probst acknowledging the lies. You know, he flat out blatantly lied to the public in season 40, saying that he didn't even know if I had been considered, and that I don't represent the show. Probst is an example of the kind of detachment from self-awareness in positions of power that are abhorrent to me, that cause the things that we face all across society. And so he would have to come to terms with that. And that's not as unlikely as it might sound. I mean, somebody could have a call, call to Jesus moment, or whatever they call it with him.
Yeah.
Come to Jesus moment with him. You know, they could, and he could recognize what he
Dirk
did.
could help with that. Maybe
Dirk could help with that. Yeah, but it's not that far of a stretch. I mean, he knows he's lying in this example. He knows they paid for my physical. You know, so for it's you know, if for him to say he didn't know if I was even considered is just an outright lie. CBS paid for my physical. They called and told me every single person who had a vote, I was the only participant. They all decided I was playing. So it wasn't, you know, oh, maybe should we think about Hatch? You know, that's real crap. And his conflation, or CBS's conflation in this Me Too movement environment with what happened on season 39 that none of us know because that was so poorly edited. And my experience on
All Stars
is, again, a horrible thing that they did and would have to take responsibility for. That had nothing to do with me doing anything inappropriate. And, you know, people have issues with that. They're like, well, what do you mean you were naked? Yeah, I was naked the entire first season. It's a part of the thing. One of the components of my having played the All-Stars was having to be who I was on the first season, just so that the other players wouldn't think I was being manipulative. I couldn't change and cause them to be concerned about why is he different. So I was doing all the same things I'd always done. none of which were harassment or anything in any way like that. And the way they edited that for salacious, as a salacious tease to get people to watch is not an accident. So they know they make these choices, and they would have to, account for those. And they haven't, and I doubt that they will. For all the behind-the-scenes promises, Mark Burnett coming up to me at the 10-year reunion, and if there's anything you ever need, Rich, I couldn't be more sorry for how things have unfolded and what they did to you, and I know our role and ever in life, your family. It all means nothing. It's unfortunate. There's this dynamic in power where there's ability to disconnect with those for whom you have little respect, and that's evident in CBS particularly. And as Jeff Probst rose in the ranks and thinks he's more in control of things, he's become extraordinarily comfortable, lacking any kind of empathy and I would say maintaining disdain for those of us who are participants on the show.
Sounds like Scientology.
Yeah, it's as gross to me.
Before we get away from the subject of Survivor, I know I keep saying it, but really get away from it. Before, I do want to, I wasn't sure if I would. I wasn't sure what it would look like or what I would ask, but I do want to acknowledge your friend, Rudy Bosch, who passed away last year at the age of 92. And he was integral to your game. I think that's safe to say. Is there a story about Rudy and yourself that took place on that island, on that beach, that didn't air on TV, that you think fans of yours or fans of Rudy's or fans of Survivor in general haven't heard before and that you'd like to share?
I don't know of a specific instance. There were so many that aired and some that didn't. Some of the more crotchety ones, when he would, like afterwards, after the show aired, he was drinking and he's really bawdy. He has Navy SEAL type jokes that would never air. He's a very, very unfiltered, stubborn son of a gun. But I love that. He'll listen if you have something to say about either what he said or what he believes. It may not change what he thinks, but he'll listen. He's not afraid of you. I love that.
Do you think he was ready for celebrity?
I do, in as much as, like, I hope I was impacted similarly. It didn't matter. I feel like it, other than the way it negatively impacted my life, didn't matter to me. It wasn't what I saw, nor was it what he saw. There were folks like Jenna and Sean who actually talked with one another about looking forward to coming out of their houses and finding the Enquirer going through their garbage. So there were people there, and a lot of the young ones who were seeking that kind of fame and celebrity. I wanted the $1 million check. Yeah. Rudy didn't give a shit one way or the other. He just didn't care. And I think on some level, particularly with his wife Marge, kind of kept him very, very organized and grounded in the midst of it, because he did get, similar to me, all kinds of requests and lots of parts of his life changed with being recognized, and there's a way to handle that graciously, and I think Marge helped him do that, and he did, and I think the overall impact of what is thought of as celebrity was minimal to non-existent, like I hope it is in my life as well.
Do you hate, and hate is a strong word, but I use it intentionally, do you hate Jeff Probst?
I hate the choices Jeff makes, knowingly. I think Probst knowingly chooses to exploit in ways that are unnecessary and to abuse in ways that are unnecessary participants of the show. I think he's not well-intentioned, as people sometimes think he is, and I've heard others say, well, of course, it's a business. They're going to do what's in their best interest. I think what they choose to do, and he particularly chooses to do, is counterproductive. It is not in their best interests. I have some compassion for their lack of awareness, for the fact that they believe some of the things, the choices are in their best interest, even when they're not. But I fault them for not reaching out, and there's a legal term where they known or should have known. And so with all of their resources, they know or should have known what they're doing in so many cases. When Jeff had his, and I've done everything over the years, literally everything, to, as comfortably as I'm capable, invite their engagement and to honestly interact with them about whatever it is they might have concerns. So when Jeff got his talk show, I saw one episode and it was absolutely horrible. And I, being an observer of people, know Jeff Probst better than he would ever believe I know him. He's detached and, again, unself-aware, more so than maybe your average Joe. And so he, I don't think, would believe the extent to which I understand him. And the truth is, he's a very, very talented guy, and he has some specific talents that could have been exploited in his own show that he didn't use. And he was following a format in which he did not fit, which looked strained and uncomfortable. And I reached out to him and, as gently as I could, but honestly, shared the fact that I thought this show was really, really not good and wouldn't last, but that I had some ideas. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for a job. I didn't ask for anything other than that I was interested in assisting him, that I would happily share with him my thoughts, and that they could do whatever they wanted with it. But you ask if I hate Jeff. I really despise the choices he has made. I despise some of the lies that he's knowingly told about who I am and the ways in which he's exploited others. It's not just about me. I don't want people thinking, oh, you have this one personal vendetta. It's not true. It's an observation of who he is and the choices he makes. As a human being, do I hate him? No. I just don't. There is lots about him that I respect. I respect the way in which he's kept himself in that kind of physical shape. I respect the way in which he is capable of engaging, kind of uniquely capable of engaging a group, and the way he's grown over time in tribal council. There's therein is that underlying skill I could have exploited and would have asked him to better exploit in his talk show, using the audience in similar ways. But no, I don't hate the person that he actually is, but I do hate many of the choices he makes and the ways in which he chooses to live, ever increasingly as he gains power, because those are the folks for whom I have the least respect. Those who are privileged and in positions of power, and who our society tends to be gentler on, to hold accountable a little less because of their power, when in fact, I am convinced they are better being held more accountable, and they should take more responsibility rather than less when they're in those privileged positions that he's in.
I'm going to jump into your YouTube channel now.
Sure.
And you do talk a lot about Survivor in the YouTube channel, and I get that. That's what people are wanting to hear from you about, and some of the details that you described, and some of the more piddly. I use the word piddly details, like where do you go to the bathroom and that kind of stuff. But I get it. But you do have one video that you did recently, and it's called Dear Jeff, No.
Yeah. And
you received some flack from people in the video.
Lots.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, and I got that you love the debate, the discussion. It's the fuel for that. One of the things that I noticed people asking you was, what was the real point behind that particular video?
Yeah.
And you heaped praise on Tony a bunch of times, and you said that it wasn't about Tony and his family, but rather it was about them being used in some way by Jeff Probst and the executives behind Survivor. Can you expand on that?
I can. Yeah, it's a touchy and interesting subject to me, and there are many subjects about which I don't even bother to engage on the YouTube channel because, like Survivor, and how many years, decades it's taken for people to even to understand the dynamics of the game, I don't think people are comfortable looking in the mirror to ask themselves if they are racist, or if they are doing things that are perceived in our culture currently as horrible to one another. And I spend more time observing and wondering what it is that drives this or that. And so I have a 2-decade history of having watched and observed and understood from a viewer's perspective and from a participant's perspective and from a very, very close personal perspective with many, many of these people behind the scenes that we're talking about. In many, many circumstances, on many levels, in many conversations, I've watched interviews that they've done and have gleaned data they'd be unaware that I was able to glean from those interviews about who they are and about what they thought of who I am, etc., and who they think others are. And so over these years, I have very, very clearly, not wondering anymore, not kind of just still in that phase of kind of observing and thinking, hey, might this be going on or that be going on? But setting that aside, how obvious that is, there's more to it. There's who they are as people, and the ways in which they engage that isn't acceptable. It's not reasonable for me to pretend that it's okay and to never talk about it. So when I talk about noticing the racist things that Jeff does, or how homophobic he truly is, I'm not even suggesting that he's fully aware of that. I'm suggesting in that he should know, or he knows or should know, given his position, these things. And he should be more accountable for how he treats those of us in categories other than himself. When he walks around and is inclusive of those like him when in a position of power, and in a buddying way, in a financial way, in a mentoring way, in a way that provides opportunities to those most similar to him, it's not okay. It isn't the same as if you're in a neighborhood and you've connected with somebody and you're helping them. When you're in that position of power and you're in control of these people's lives, it is homophobia. It is racism that undermines people's opportunities. Yes, Black Lives Matter, and that's what they're talking about. They're talking about how some people are blinded to the ways in which they are abusing others as if they don't matter. I hope that helps. I hope that's a little bit more clear. People are up in arms about my being specific, and give us examples.
And that's where I was going, was with that.
I won't. And here's why. If I tell you the words that somebody used in an incident, it would have almost no impact on you. But it is those words that they used in that incident and these actions they took in this incident and the ways in which the record shows their disdain for anyone outside their little club that I'm talking about. And if I were to start picking it apart, all I would have back from people is, well, that's normal, or this is that, or this is the other thing. And that's not my point. I'm not talking about what's normal. I'm talking about normal sometimes being racist. I'm talking about the society in which we live that is filled with examples of unfairness. And in this particular case, it's so obvious. And this person, Jeff Probst, and that company should be more accountable, should be more responsible. They've had an enormous impact on our society, and they are choosing to pretend. That facade that I talked to you earlier about, that I hate, they're putting their heads in the sand as if they're not, these exploded fat cats just absorbing every bit of profit they can from this enterprise in which they are terribly exploiting individuals.
So when you say that people should look at the record and it would be very clear to them.
Yes.
I won't ask you to be specific. You've been clear on, I'm not going there. Fair. If you're just giving people, let's call it a treasure map.
Yeah.
What direction should they be looking to find that record or those examples so that they're not leaving those comments for you asking, well, what the hell are you talking about, Rich?
Yeah. I love it.
Point us in a direction where we can understand what this is.
Yeah, let's go. So how many survivors, participants have there been?
Hundreds.
Over 600.
Yeah.
How many of those are Black?
Less than 200.
Oh, try again.
Less than 100. Less than 100.
Try again.
I would say how many of those are Asian?
How many of those are, well, this is where I'm going. I'm just pulling Black, gay, Asian. It is not accidental. It's not because a casting crew, a group in the casting department kind of, found these extraordinary personalities and they all happen to be white. That's not why it happens. It happens because of the intentional decisions of Probst and the other executives of who they want, who they think represents survivor, and who they think will compel a viewing audience. And they're daft. They're detached. They're in a bubble that is.
But do you think that they're just doing a show? Like they're casting interesting personalities that are gonna clash and that are gonna just make an interesting show. And we talked about this earlier, that where
fuck them if they are.
That social component to now it's more about the audience and the entertainment. So is it just a show?
Fuck them if they are, and it is. You could have asked that question of me after season 2.
Yeah.
And I would have said, true. Yeah, baby. You know, they don't know where this is going. They don't know this, they don't know that. Fuck them if after 40 seasons and this record, you look at the numbers, you go through and see if you think there is even the modicum of a fair representation of who we are as Americans, or whether or not there's something not just untoward, but wrong, absolutely wrong, intolerable going on with these people's choices. These privileged, wealthy people's intentional choosing to represent Survivor in a particular way that they feel is tolerable. Fuck you. Not you.
Yeah.
But I think maybe from my language you get the intensity with which I have come to feel how intolerable it has become. And I apologize to any of you who still feel as if I am being kind of gossamer, kind of pretending that there aren't, you know, the specifics and less clear than you would want me to be. But I don't know how to be more clear and to be as impactful. I want you who are listening to do your own research. I want you to make your own decisions. I'm not interested in having an opinion about what's going on and forcing it down your throat. You'll see by my reactions to the Dear Jeff No, they're few and far between, and I don't care what your reactions are. They can be positive or negative. I'm happy for them. Thank you for listening. And if you choose to wonder whether I might have some kind of a point, then look into it. That's really my point behind there are a couple of videos like that with respect to Jeff. But it's become so intolerable for me, and I'll just say that I am, how do I want to say this? I am behind the scenes far more specific than I'm being now. When there's an audience who understands and has made the choices they've made, I don't shy away from talking about them. And from the individuals who've been affected and abused, etc., I've engaged with any number of them who've reached out to me when they eventually realize, wow, I never had any idea what you were talking about until they did this. And then they did that, and and this and the other thing. There is a lot. It's an enormous amount of data, and it's ugly. It's just horribly, horribly ugly. And Jeff Probst doesn't wonder. He knows very specifically what I'm talking about and what he's done. His choices on air many times, as far back as All Stars. I don't know about the first season. The first season was a whole other ball of wax in which they did not have a representative of standards and practices on set. And there was cheating and people were being fed, and it was awful. It was awful, and we were abused as a result of it. And those are just the only, those are some of the specifics that have kind of leaked out a little bit from season 1. From season 1, I can't, am unwilling to confuse the issue with 39 more seasons of those specific examples. It's just not, it's an intentional decision on my part that I've thought through as best I can. And this is my best effort at explaining to you, I'm aware of how big a problem it is. It should be intolerable at this point. It's gross. It's truly grotesque. And I feel those in power know, or should have known for a long, long time, that what they're doing and how they're doing it is reprehensible.
And I respect your position on, you know, that's where the boundary is. I'm not going to go there. People know what they know, and if they don't know it, go and figure it out if they really want to know. And I brought it up because I think that there are your viewers that were looking for even more clarity after you had already given the clarity to the clarity.
Oh yeah, did I say I love Tony?
Yeah.
I love Tony. I love him. I love his game. I think he grew more than any other player. I think he's beautiful. I think his family's beautiful. I think they're gorgeous. I love them. That's not the point, people.
I mean, have you? I mean, you bring Tony up as the example in the video, you know, in the way that his family was shown at the reunion and whatnot. Have you talked to him about this?
No. No, I haven't talked to Tony about it. And for me, it isn't about him or his family really at all. It's about the way in which Probst and CBS will exploit that, has exploited that. Not even, go ahead, exploit it. It's a beautiful family, any beautiful family. But would they have done that with Natalie and her boyfriend? And would they have felt the same? This is the tenuous part. Would Probst and the executives have felt the same way if someone other than Tony's family were being projected that way? I'm never going to convince many viewers.
So really, it's about a lack of diversity and a lack of inclusivity to the point where it's just spitting in the face of who we are as a society and a complete ignorance about how society has developed. No?
No, it's not ignorant. It's not ignorance. It's
an
intentional, aware choice.
Right.
This is not their ignorant. This is the part that is intolerable. It is their intentional acts to limit participants to those with whom they're most comfortable, they think, being representative of their show. And in so doing, dismissing who we are as Americans, as people who share the planet, as Earth. We are not this little privileged group of wealthy folk who film this show Survivor. And had there been a season or two where this was Mark Burnett's pet project and he wanted to show a gay guy and give them the opportunity to be successful, etc., goody, you know, more power to you. This is a cultural phenomenon. And what is and isn't tolerable is a conversation I think that we could have. What is beyond that conversation is a phenomenon like Survivor. I think it becomes unconscionable that Les Moonves, Mark Burnett, Jeff Probst deposit checks into their bank accounts in the amounts viewers would not believe that they do without being more responsible with their entertainment. So I don't care what the wealthy have been able to get away with and with what rules they've been able to skirt or limit in ways that they've been able to do for decades and decades and decades. In the 50s, there was the quiz show scandal. And since that whole incident, these shows have been required to have a representative of standards and practices on set. And just like anybody who's in power and is wealthy, they've ignored it. There wasn't one on Survivor. I don't know that there is one today. I would imagine there must be, because of many of us who have faced the consequences of there not having been out there while the show is being filmed. And when there is all kinds of...
Was there one on All Stars?
No, not that I was ever aware. So was there behind the scenes? I don't know, but I never met one. I never saw one. I am not the end all. They don't need to come to me, a participant, and say, by the way, here's the representative standards of practice. But there is the FCC, an entity, anybody behind the business who ought to be tasked with ensuring that there is an objective party monitoring those kinds of things in which people can be exploited and shouldn't be, and which unfairness could rule the game. It is not for me about making sure there's 3 of you and there are 4 black people and there are 2 gay people and there are 7 Asians because we haven't had many before. That's asinine. That isn't it. But there is a necessity that there ought to be questions and thoroughness surrounding who it is that is making these choices and selections that are, they call, representing us, and why, if there is a dearth of a particular group, does that exist? There you go. That's a little add-on to my little video.
No, I think respectfully to you and respectfully to your viewers on your YouTube channel, I think that cleared it up. I really do believe that I'm an unbiased, outside, didn't make a comment on your video, watched the video as an unbiased third party, removed my opinion from it, and same in reading the comments that were on the video. And I do think that that's a very clear answer to what people were looking for.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
No,
I'm not trying to be obtuse. I am trying to be as clear about it as I can be, but there is some responsibility I feel individuals have when I'm bringing up a topic or a conversation to choose whether or not they want to learn more, engage more about it, figure it out, or actually make a decision about what they think.
Well, I also think that there's a certain level of you're talking about your perspective and the evidence that you believe to be true and the interactions that you've had, and that's important that you focus on you and what you know and what you believe, and to provide specific examples. And that isn't to in any way undercut the strength behind some of the words that you've used to describe the situation. Abuse is a very strong word, and they're not being ignorant and rather being intentional in how they handle the situations is very strong. But at the same time, I agree with you, and I said to you last week, I'm not going to put my opinion into things, but I would be of the same opinion as you, that it's not your place nor my place to talk out of school and share the stories of other people who have experienced that abuse or that intention or the lack of opportunity, because that's their story.
It is.
And for you to provide those examples, I think would be out of school, and leave it to people to go and ask questions elsewhere. In the same way that Yeah.
It really would for me. These people who have, in great numbers, come to me and shared, if I haven't observed that myself, and I have many, many, many times, many examples, it is not just personal experience of what's happened to me, but I've actually watched these things play out and these choices be made. I've even been involved in discussions about why the choices are made with people behind the scenes, and have called them to the carpet, called them to account in the moment, and have watched some of those decisions go on to be changed, but more often not. I'll stop with that. And affect individuals very, very negatively, unnecessarily. And so I won't say never, but I'm not prepared to name these people and to talk about what it is they've endured. That's
and when they care for their story to be told. I mean, that's,
yeah, and many of them have. Some of them have shared on their own at different times some of the things that have happened, but many haven't.
I think that's totally fair.
It's not for me to do.
I want to shift gears again to another experience with a different Mark Burnett show.
Okay.
And talk about Celebrity Apprentice, season 11. Arguably, in my opinion, the best season of the show, so far as casting goes, and so far as the things that were structurally and interpersonal dynamic wise. How did that happen for you? And do you feel that do you feel the same way about The Apprentice as you do about Survivor?
I feel a little differently about Apprentice because I can't conflate the two. They're so different. So the way in which Survivor tries to or contends that it is representative of us, society, is very, very different from how Celebrity Apprentice particularly represents itself or claims to what it claims to be. It claims to be something different, and it's an entity all to itself. There is no real game or competition. There are no rules. People don't think this through, I don't think, very often, but literally everything on the show is at a whim up to whatever the person behind the wall in that conference room decides to send to Donald Trump's ear. I mean, it's absolutely literally made up on the spot. It isn't in the participants' control. They can't compete to do something and and expect that they will fairly win if they do this or that. It's
even
they're
down
unrelated.
Is eliminated. Yeah.
Completely unrelated shows. So that said, the dynamic being so different, the expectations of the participants are equally different. So the celebrities who are participants maintain their individual celebrity, and they do what they're doing, I think many times out of a desire to expose the brand that is them, and to be charitable, to win some money for charities, people that they would like to support. And it's just a part of the dynamic where I think most of the participants genuinely feel like, in a fun way, it's an opportunity to give back a little bit.
How do you get to Celebrity Apprentice? I'm not discounting your celebrity in any way.
Oh, you should.
No. I mean, for the exact reason that we're having this interview, you very clearly laid the whole. You've been the architect of the reality TV genre game. So, if anybody deserves to play a game in general, any reality TV game, I would say it would be Richard Hatch. But in how you describe how the show works, did you know that about it before going into it, or did you just, oh yeah, Trump wants me there, so what the hell?
Trump didn't want me there. No, he didn't. I'll explain. So this show was an opportunity for me who, I'm not a celebrity in the sense of how most actors and musicians and talented folk rise to this label of celebrity. My celebrity is a result of name recognition born of a new genre that, you're right, I had a powerful impact on, and it turns out quite long lasting. So my celebrity, my name recognition was different, and it wouldn't necessarily bring me to places where people are looking for what had normally been thought of as celebrities. In this case, I was asked to go to New York to meet with the executive producer, and we were in Union Station at the restaurant there, and we sat down to talk about it. And one of the first things he said to me, which was wonderful for me, it was like, so what are we going to have? Usually I'm really well prepared and intrigued and interested to try and go through and learn who you are, and I would be making all kinds of notes and thoughts about what I believed would or wouldn't work within the context of Celebrity Apprentice. But I've been informed you're a participant, period. I don't even have a choice. So what do you want for lunch? I laughed so hard, and I thought, wow, I didn't even know Trump, knew me that well. Trump and I had been friends / acquaintances for years. Up until that point, I'd been to events with him. I'd sat at, he'd invited me to sit on the dais at his roast at the Friars Club. I did. I sat with his family and Melania at Globetrotters games, and I would see him outside of his building when I worked for CBS Early Show, and he was coming in or out of the building. We'd chat at his Woolman rink, ice rink in New York. I lived in New York. I mean, we had real conversations with one another about who we are, and my take is that he gave me the time of day because of my celebrity. At the time, I really was known and pursued, and I was invited to everything, and so his being with me and around me and inviting it was a part of it. As host of Live with Regis, I rode the elevator in Trump Tower naked to his office, walked into it naked. He put his arm around me. I mean, we knew each other. But it turns out it wasn't he who put me on that show. It wasn't him who decided you're on Celebrity Apprentice. I don't know what's true or not. Rumors I heard were that he did not want me as a participant, but that Mark Burnett overruled him and said that I would be a good participant, and told Eden, that's the executive producer, that he's one of them. He's one of the participants, period. Just, whatever you need to do. And so Eden wanted to meet me, even though he didn't have to decide. He had been meeting people to decide whether they were going to be on or not, but I was already included, according to Mark Burnett.
Do you think, having spent time and having observed him, that Donald Trump really wanted to be president of the United States?
I really don't. I really, truly believe that he intentionally chose to run, and he intentionally considered the impact of running, and realized that there was what he described personally and on tape. It's out there. You can listen to him talking about it. He spent years thinking this through. A contingent in our society that was exploitable. And he talked about being able to easily, he said, run as a Republican, because I can tell those idiots anything I want and they'll believe me. and this is all on camera. He wasn't shy about it. Trump has this belief that what he feels, irrespective of how much thought goes into it, is appropriate. And there is a history, a long, long, long history of his not caring or not putting any thought into and not caring about what it is that he says in the moment. Minutes after having made a strong point, he can make the opposite point without any shame, without any concern for his having made that minutes earlier, that opposite point, and he can change it again and minutes later. My concern isn't that that happens, because I think the only way we grow is to be open-minded enough to learn and take in data that may then change our perspective. My issue is with the pace and the lack of consideration in a broader context of data. Anything that isn't self-serving is of no interest to him.
And on that point, do you think he still wants to be president, or he's tired of it, that he's just so far into it now that he can't walk away?
Well, I don't think it's quite like that. I think he's so far into it now that if he were to walk away, it might look bad on him. It isn't about whether he wants to be there or not. It's about what it looks like. It's always about what it looks like and what he might get out of it. I mean, this person has used the presidency to self-enrich his family, him, and more than anyone ever, well, considered being possible, because it's illegal, but he's just found ways to do so in the most grand sense, most obvious ways. And so to that extent, I'm sure he's very much enjoying the ways in which he's able to direct lines of funding into his and his family's accounts. But other than that, I think it's obvious to anyone who follows anything he says or tweets about that it's the most frustrating thing he's ever done. It isn't as if you hear anything about any real presidential responsibility or how his citizens, as we are supposedly known, might be affected. Everything you hear is about what's fair to him and his reputation and his this and his that. He is so detached from what that job is supposed to be, yet he is one of the most interpersonally adept people I've ever met. And so, as odd as that sounds, I understand how he maneuvers within the White House and how many people others might think of as bright don't run screaming fast enough. They do eventually, but they don't do it quickly enough. Like, how could you wait more than a day of the shit that you hear coming out of his mouth, and the hypocrisy and the damage and the destructiveness and the self-centeredness and the lack of concern for rule or of law or people.
You think as a human being he feels any sense of guilt or remorse when it comes to COVID, for example, and the number of people?
No, he's not capable of believing he did anything wrong. That's why it's the China virus. That's the most obvious absurdity that he continues to repeat over and over and over and over. To label this the China virus in the way he does is so intentional and so born of only protecting himself. There is no other country whose graph follows the trajectory of ours. The only difference is the way in which he chose to deal with it, the way in which he avoided, pretended it didn't exist, said it would disappear, did all the things that he believed would happen, regardless of what he did, and didn't care about the consequences, and now could never, ever even begin to accept responsibility for that. So there is not even one iota of guilt. It's not a part of his makeup. Ask psychologist Mary Trump whether or not there's guilt. This is a carefully crafted animal. This thing that we have in our acting as our president was carefully crafted by an environment of incomprehensible excess, entitlement, disdain for others around him, a lack of empathy. I'll give you one story about being on Celebrity Apprentice, out of the many that I could tell from having known him for years before that. But on Celebrity Apprentice, with cameras rolling, with so many of us in a room, sitting next to his daughter Ivanka, Marlee Matlin across the table from him, somehow for some reason that day caught his eye. And I'll tell you, any woman who puts on makeup, dresses, who walks past is apt to catch his eye and can utterly incapacitate him. Something happens where he not just stops, he stops talking and literally will drool. I've watched it happen where he's not sure what to say or how to act. And here we are in the room filming the show, and she kind of caught his eye in that way, and you saw the switch, and he started to talk to her about what he might do to her, how she's affecting him, and this, you're the way in which I would treat you, and the inappropriate beyond what you could ever imagine saying to her had you encountered her in a hallway. Never mind sitting in public on camera with your daughter sitting next to you. It was fascinating to watch. And the man is utterly unaware of the way in which he's perceived by observant people around him. It just doesn't matter. It's why he's fat. It's why he plays golf. It's why he says the things he does. None of that matters. He's entitled to it. In that movie Dune, this is my best image of him. Did you ever watch that movie Dune or hear about the movie Dune where that thing blew up, and he had the pus on his face? And, that's how I think of Donald Trump. That's the orange makeup and all this covering it up. He's that thing, that fat, blowing around kind of thing, just unconcerned with anyone or anything other than, whatever he was entitled to. Wasn't that one looking for more silver or whatever he was, and more food, more silver? And that's Trump. Give me McDonald's and give me
Pizza the Hut and Spaceballs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think Joe Biden stands a chance of beating him in November?
I have to.
But more to that. Do you think Joe Biden stands a chance in November? And if you were advising the Biden campaign, what would you be telling Biden to do?
Exactly what he's doing.
Okay.
He's making clear statements infrequently. The COVID situation has prevented the excess that typically would characterize a race for presidency, where our televisions would be overwhelmed with rallies and this, and during those times, Biden struggles sometimes with stepping on things that he's saying or mispronouncing things, and I think that would be more of a problem for him. So I think what he's doing is, there's nothing there's no way I would tweak it. What I would say is, I do believe there are myriad others who would be more suitable. And I don't think Biden will win on his merits. I think he will win because Trump is finally intolerable for enough people to put Biden in the office. And I think it will be worth doing. I think having Biden there to return to some sense of normalcy and to give us an opportunity as Americans to actually ask ourselves, who do we want in that office, and put them there next time, is reasonable. I think he's a reasonable choice. I don't think his age and his history are necessarily deserving of the presidency over many of those others who were vying for the Democratic nomination. But so be it. He's the Democratic nominee, and I hope he wins. I choose not to be able to imagine Trump winning.
Another 4 years of Trump.
No, I can't. I will be your neighbor.
Welcome. Come on in.
Yeah, what that would say about who we are as Americans, it already is kind of intolerable for me, and I think it's despicable that we put him there to begin with. But maybe that's unfair because he was convincing to too many people, and I knew firsthand things that others didn't. But if they don't know by now, Trump did everything humanly possible in his first run for the presidency to scream to the heavens, I'm not suitable. There's nothing more he could have done to prove his incompetence, from grabbing, women by, to whatever.
Yeah.
And still he was voted in. So wow, who knows what could happen this time?
Undeniably, you are, in my opinion, a popular culture icon. And what do you hope your legacy will be in popular culture as the genre of reality TV, or just popular culture in general, expands and future audiences discover where reality TV came from, and they learn about Richard Hatch and the guy that was the architect for everything they're seeing?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm giving you a question that speaks to ego, aren't I? Just
well, you might be surprised by the answer, but I don't know that they ever will, first of all, as time passes. And I guess the truth is I don't care. What I've come to believe is that the likeliness of being understood, the likeliness of an audience or of people really knowing me is so minuscule, so tragically small, that it would be silly for me to care, to want to influence it one way or the other. That said, I'll never give up who I am. I'll never be tired of engaging honestly. It's fulfilling for me. So when asked, when invited, I love not just sharing my perspective, but pursuing an understanding of yours and engaging in ways that hopefully help us understand one another better than when we first started talking, as opposed to what I believe is the norm, which is the opposite, and that we walk away very often from these superficial engagements really not knowing much, and maybe even less than we thought we did before going into them. That's what the facade causes, I think. It's just in the way. So I don't know what my legacy will be.
But
Not
don't
long
care.
ago, huh?
But don't care.
Long ago, I tried to accept the idea that it makes most sense for me not to care. It would be interesting to me if I were known more accurately. But I don't know how that would be possible given the pathway. You know, who would ever go through, you know, a review of who I was prior to Survivor, what I did in the show that caused people to perceive me in a particular way, understand the dynamic of viewers not understanding the show to have caused you know, the legal problems, the imprisoning for 4 years of me for something I didn't do. I mean, these things happen rampantly in America, but nobody would go through the time of trying to understand the dynamics of why I was targeted and why that resulted in what it did. So for me to be concerned with how I'd be perceived is a little too broad, too much of a challenge. I'm concerned with my retaining, as honestly as possible, my willingness to be honest and to be who I am, as opposed to being either dismissive of inquiry or a hermit.
I want to do some word association with you. This will be one of the very last things we do. Throw a word at you, and just the first thing that comes to mind. And I couldn't think of a better person to do this with. So just randomly.
Pressure.
Pineapple.
Ooh, yum. My favorite fruit.
Gary Busey.
Cold. My favorite fruit when it's cold. Oh, Gary Busey. Wow. Really, really kind of sad how detached he is and exploited. His mental illness is exploited in a way that I think is sad.
Clothes.
Barrier.
Okay.
Clothes are barrier.
Prison.
Sad is the first word that comes to mind. It was horrible, devastating experience, but more so for how I learned we treat one another. I'm articulate, I'm educated, I'm capable of managing what I endured, which was significant. But I watched those of us least capable, those of us most vulnerable, and the way in which we mistreat them in ways none of us could accept were we to look into it. And so instead we pretend we don't do that. And it's tragic.
Love.
Pinnacle. It's the goal. For me, sharing the journey is the point. So my divorce a couple of years ago was one of the more devastating parts of my life. Love is rare, I think, and worth pursuing.
Pinnacle and rare. Those are the words that were glaring to me in that. Pinnacle and rare. Well, I like that too. Sue Hawk.
Sad. Boy, sad keeps coming up in this. Compassion. I'm angry at how she was exploited to my detriment. When we went to, what's that word when you don't go to court because you've signed an agreement? When we went to arbitration, this is what, I mean, I feel like could it be senility setting? I don't know. When we went to arbitration, and I recognized that they were about to agree to pay her, I turned to my attorney and said, I'm not signing anything where she's paid something that I'm not. The only victim here is me. Why is she being paid after we've been through this whole scenario? We've seen that none of what she said occurred. This was all an emotional reaction. I never touched her. There was no, any of that. We saw 4 cameras, unedited, no blue dot, from 4 different angles. We know what happened. We know she turned around intentionally. She had something in mind. We think it's that she wanted to sue CBS and get out of the game, but she was going to be paid. The lawyers just decided, oh, well, okay, it's good enough. We've gone far enough, and we'll give her this. And I was like, no, I'm not signing that unless I get exactly what she get. I mean, she's not going to get a penny more than you decide to pay me, the one who is the victim, the one who's been portrayed inaccurately as having done something. And it was so little about her. So when you say Sue Hawk, I just think of all the things we talked about and CBS and exploiting participants. I think she was exploited. I think she attempted to exploit them. She was in over her head, and they exploited me as a result. They just used that salacious editing to portray something that didn't happen. I think Jeff Probst cheated within the game, calling me out when he was supposed to have called out, I think it was Boston Rob, who hit the water before me, who's his friend. Lots of things come to mind when you say Sue Hawk, but they're mostly about CBS again and their exploitation of victims who couldn't begin to fight their machine.
Comfort.
Beach came to mind. I don't know why, but dogs, my babies.
Sacrifice.
The truth.
Loser.
Probst. Do I hate him? You asked if I hated him, so he's on my mind, and you say loser and Probst. That's what came to mind.
Winner.
Happy. I think success is happiness. If you're happy, you're a winner.
Rudy.
A lot of things come to mind. Real.
Final words from you. Feel free to talk about or encourage people to look at something or talk about what you've got going on. Anything you want people to know, you get the last word.
I hope your audience, to whatever extent from one episode of your, I'm sure, going to be successful show,
Thank you.
Walks away with the idea that wondering or questioning what it is they think or believe is a good thing. Questioning why they think what they do. I try to do it as often as possible, but I don't do it anywhere near as often as I should. But I think it's a really good thing to do.
I like that too. For the purposes of recording, I want to thank Richard Hatch for being my first guest on Long Time No See. Really, I didn't get to jump into the story of how I got you here, convinced you to be here. I don't know if there's any convincing involved, but maybe I'll do that in an intro piece. But I want to thank you for saying yes to being on this crazy journey with me for like 4 hours. And I've really, really enjoyed it and genuinely appreciate your time.
I couldn't be more grateful for the invitation and for your patience in listening to me babble.
There's our episode 1, folks. And yeah, stay tuned. Episode 2 in a few weeks. More details soon.
Thanks, CJ.
Thanks, Rich.